Ghosts might not pay rent, but people spend a fortune trying to prove they exist. From beeping boxes to cameras that claim to see the invisible, ghost hunters drag around toolkits that look like Radio Shack's clearance aisle. But do these devices actually detect spirits or just really expensive static? Let's start with the backbone of every ghost hunter's kit, the EMF meter. At first glance, it looks like a chunky TV remote with Christmas lights glued on. Its actual job? Detect electromagnetic fields. Basically, invisible waves of energy from electrical wiring, cell phones, and just about every gadget in your house. Paranormal investigators hijack this electrician's tool, claiming that sudden spikes in EMF readings mean a ghost is close by. The theory goes like this. Ghosts are made of energy, and energy disrupts electromagnetic fields. Simple enough, right? Except the science doesn't back that up. The same spike that makes a ghost hunter gasp could just be your toaster finishing a bagel. Or worse, someone forgetting to turn off their Bluetooth. In fact, skeptics love pointing out that haunted houses often have really bad wiring. High EMF exposure can even cause people to feel uneasy, paranoid, or think they're being watched. In other words, that creepy vibe in the basement might be less angry spirit and more, you need an electrician. But here's the thing. EMF meters are cheap, dramatic, and easy to use. When the lights suddenly flash from green to red, it feels like something supernatural is happening, even if it's just a bad outlet. That's why, despite all the flaws, EMF meters remain the poster child of ghost hunting, the spirit box. If the EMF meter is the flashlight of ghost hunting, the spirit box is the megaphone. It's basically a hacked radio that rapidly scans through AM or FM stations, spitting out bursts of static, fragments of music, or the occasional DJ announcing a car dealership sale. Ghost hunters believe spirits can manipulate these radio fragments to form words. So when you hear a crackle followed by what sounds like leave or help, it's treated as direct communication from the other side. The problem? Your brain is hardwired to find patterns in noise, a trick called pareidolia. It's why people see shapes in clouds or hear secret messages when a record is played backward. So when you're sitting in a dark room, nerves on edge, and the box spits out a garbled hello, it doesn't take much imagination to turn that into hello. Critics say the spirit box is just a fancy way to talk to radio stations in ghost voice. But fans argue the odds of random snippets forming meaningful answers are too high to ignore. Either way, it's loud, eerie, and great for TV. Nothing spices up a haunted asylum episode like a static-filled box shouting nonsense. The EVP recorder. If the spirit box is like ghosts yelling through static, the EVP recorder is more like ghosts whispering into a diary. EVP stands for electronic voice phenomena, which is a fancy way of saying we recorded static and thought we heard something spooky in it later. Here's how it works. Investigators leave a digital recorder running in an empty room. Hours later, they play it back, listening for faint voices that weren't heard at the time. A hiss of air might sound like, "Get out." A cough in the distance becomes, "Help me." Even the squeak of shoes on old floorboards can be rebranded as a ghostly moan. Skeptics point out the obvious. EVPs are just audio pareidolia. Our brains are desperate to turn noise into words, especially when we expect to hear voices. Add in the fact that digital recorders pick up everything. Plumbing, creaking wood, stomach growls, and suddenly every old house is haunted. But here's why EVP recordings are still so powerful. They feel personal. Unlike lights or numbers on a meter, a whisper on tape sounds like a ghost is speaking directly to you. Even if it's just bad acoustics, that's a hard feeling to shake. Dowsing rods. Before ghost hunters had gadgets with blinking lights, they had sticks. Dowsing rods are two thin metal rods, usually bent at a right angle, that are held loosely in each hand. The idea is simple. When a spirit is nearby, the rods will cross, swing, or point the way, almost like a supernatural compass. Historically, dowsing rods were used to find underground water or minerals. Ghost hunters later adopted them, claiming spirits could guide the rods to answer yes or no questions. Want to know if the ghost is male or female? Ask aloud, and wait to see which way the rods turn. The problem? It's called the ideomotor effect. That's when your muscles make tiny, unconscious movements without you realizing it. Basically, your own body is steering the rods, not the spirit of Uncle Frank. Add in a drafty room or uneven grip, and the rods will wiggle even without a ghost in sight. Still, dowsing rods are strangely popular because they feel interactive. Unlike a meter or recorder, they give an instant physical reaction. And honestly, two twitchy metal rods moving on their own in a dark room is creepy enough, even if it's just physics at play. Ouija boards. Forget blinking lights and static-filled radios. Sometimes ghost hunters bring out the big gun of the supernatural world, the Ouija board. It's a flat board with letters, numbers, and the words yes and no, along with a heart-shaped pointer called a planchette. The idea is simple. Sit around the board, place your fingers lightly on the planchette, ask a question, and wait for the spirits to spell out an answer. But here's the catch. Ouija boards weren't invented by ancient mystics. They were mass-produced in the late 1800s as a parlor game. Yep, the same era that gave us lawn darts also gave us talking to the dead on cardboard. So how do they work? Again, the ideomotor effect comes into play. Tiny, unconscious movements from the participants slowly push the planchette across the board. Everyone swears they aren't moving it, but in reality, they all are, just a little. That's why messages sometimes feel eerily accurate. The group's expectations steer the outcome. Still, Ouija boards remain iconic because they feel dangerous. Whether you believe in spirits or not, there's something unsettling about asking a board questions and watching it glide toward the word die. Creepy? Absolutely. Scientific? Not so much. The SLS camera. If Ouija boards feel old-fashioned, the SLS camera looks like it came straight out of a sci-fi movie. SLS stands for Structured Light Sensor, and it's basically a modified Xbox Kinect camera. Yes, the same device once used to play Dance Central is now used to hunt the undead. Here's how it works. The camera projects a grid of invisible infrared dots into a room. When the dots bounce back, the software maps anything it sees into a stick figure shape. If a person is standing there, you'll see their outline. If the camera maps a figure when no one is visible, ghost hunters call it proof of a spirit. The problem? The Kinect wasn't built for ghost hunting. It's easily fooled by chairs, lamps, curtains, or even random shadows. The software just tries to make sense of shapes, and if it thinks a coat rack looks like a person, suddenly you've got a spirit waving in the corner. Despite this, the SLS camera is a fan favorite on paranormal shows. There's nothing creepier than watching a stick figure dance across your screen in an empty room. Skeptics call it glitchy software. Believers call it undeniable evidence. Either way, it makes for some seriously spooky footage.